Hello, Pray Tell friends. Here we are again. We're at the NPM National Convention in St. Louis. There's over 2,000 people here, and I'm delighted today to have with us Deacon William Ditewig, who is one of the presenters here at NPM. Deacon William Ditewig. Bill is former executive director of the Secretariat for the Diaconate at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, and now Bill is Theology professor at Santa Clara University. So, hi.
How you doing?
Good to have you here.
Oh, it's an honor to be here, Anthony. Thank you.
So you're a permanent deacon.
I am.
I'm an eternal priest, Jesus Christ, but I thought I could only use that bad line if I don't wear my Roman collar. So we're all in the ministry.
Here we go.
It's all about service. So, Bill, today is Deacon's Day at NPM. What's that about? What's happening?
Well, I'm really thankful that NPM has this opportunity. It's a great opportunity both for deacons themselves to come and reflect on our ministry, but also for those who perhaps work with deacons, especially in the celebration of the liturgy, as musicians, to find out a little bit more about the diaconate. There's still an awful lot of myths and misperceptions out there, so this is a good opportunity to do it. And I'm very thankful NPM does that.
Is there one myth or misperception you want to blow out of the water for us?
Well, normally the big one is that the Second Vatican Council renewed the diaconate because of a shortage of priests in the Third World. The evidence is just the opposite. The vast majority of the bishops who pushed for a renewed diaconate actually came from Europe as a result of the Second World War and the concentration camp experience. And that usually surprises people.
Right. But the point is, it's a ministry in its own right. It's not about a defect in numbers in the priesthood.
That's
it's
correct.
About the Church's understanding of the threefold ministry.
It is. And again, if you think it through, the idea that a bishop anywhere would say, well, I don't have enough priests, so I think I'll have deacons instead. It's just that's a ludicrous argument on its face, because it is a vocation in its own right.
Yes. I believe you're speaking here at NPM on the connection between the deacon's liturgical ministry and service to the poor. What is that connection, Bill?
Well, if you look closely at the role of the deacon at Mass and look at the various things that the deacon does, it's all about the relationship of the people together and with God. We can go through every bit of what the deacon does at Mass. Probably the most significant would be the dismissal itself. Most of my priest friends like to joke that the deacon always gets the last word, but that last word is important because we're sending all of us out onto mission. The church is being sent.
After 5 stanzas of the closing hymn.
After 5 stanzas of the closing hymn. Maybe I should say it a second time after that. But I think that connection between, and again, if we go back to the patristic fathers, especially people like Chrysostom, they make this connection very, very clear, that the reason we worship God finds its best expression in how we care for the poorest among us. And that's a vital connection that needs to be made.
It is, and it's a connection that Pope Francis is making especially strongly, but of course Pope Benedict made it very strongly, as have all of the popes for at least a century
They've
now.
been saying it. I'm not sure we've always been good at listening to it.
Yeah, indeed. At Pray Tell, we generally avoid any sort of controversy, so I want to turn in that spirit to the ordination of women, to the diaconate, which I think there is some controversy or maybe misunderstanding about. In my understanding, the ordination of women as deacons is still an open question at the official level. Is that right?
It is, and a lot of people are confused by this. But when you examine the documents that came out from Paul VI, from Pope John Paul II, and even from Pope Benedict, whenever they made reference to the ordination of women, it was always very carefully defined as ordination of women to the priesthood, not to the diaconate. And on several occasions, then Cardinal Ratzinger was approached by various people and organizations to say, does that teaching of the Church on the ordination of women to the priesthood, does that apply to the deacon? And he very openly said, no, that remains an unaddressed question. In fact, he assigned it to 2 consecutive meetings of the International Theological Commission himself asking that question. So there has been no definitive statement on the part of any part of the magisterium on that particular question. And most of us who are writing on that subject today carefully distinguish between what the church has said about ordaining women to the priesthood and the possibility of ordaining women to the diaconate as a distinct order.
Yeah, this is very important to understand so that, people don't make, false accusations about, your orthodoxy or anyone else's in the magisterium's understanding of that. And if I'm not mistaken, in parts of the Eastern Orthodox Church, there is, even if it's very limited, ordination of women understood to be true sacramental ordination as deacons, even if it's perhaps nuns in somewhat cloistered monasteries. Do you know more about that?
I'm not particularly expert in that. Phyllis Zagano is, but yes, the way you've described it is quite accurate. And again, that's going to affect some of our dialogue. If we accept Orthodox orders as valid orders, and they choose to ordain women as deacons or deaconesses, that's going to affect the conversation on how we go forward.
Yeah, so I think that conversation will continue. I want to turn to music. Do deacons have to be singers? I've heard, again, in some of the Eastern churches that the liturgy seems to have developed with more of the singing for deacons because, well, I don't know what that said about their priests or priests in general, but, in our liturgy, the deacon has smaller portions at the liturgy of the Mass, but there's that exultet, and that's a pretty complicated melody, and I don't know who, put that to English for our missal, but it's a challenging piece of music. What do you think about musical formation of our deacons for their liturgical ministry?
Well, I'm a musician myself, and I have to say that the formation generally lacks in that area. And again, many of our candidates for diaconate are quite scared and nervous about all that, and they've been reassured by well-intentioned deacons and priests, so don't worry about it, you don't have to. The old joke from the Eastern churches, of course, is that you had to have a good voice to be a deacon. When you lost your voice, they ordained you to the priesthood, and when you lost your mind, they ordained you to be a bishop. We don't have that expression in the Latin church, but I do think it's important that deacons at least make the attempt. Chanting the dismissal on Easter Sunday, for example, with the double Alleluia, giving the exultet a try. Again, it is chant. The new translation makes it particularly difficult to sustain it, but I think with practice, I think it's, and again, it goes back to your first question, or the question you had about the connection with justice. You look at the words of the exultet, and the reason the church has assigned that role to the deacon in the presence of Christ the light is to proclaim that mission of salvation and redemption, and that's the deacon himself is an attempt to incarnate that for the assembly.
Yes, and I was not involved in translating the text of the Exultet. I personally like it. I find it very rich and very beautiful. Perhaps some of it's a bit too elevated for some people's tastes, and of course opinions vary. It does concern me that this melody, when done well, is just a treasure, but I do wonder whether we shouldn't have a second real simplex melody. I wonder if that's something I or others could explore.
I think that would be an excellent idea. And again, because how many parishes have the time or talent in their own parishes to do the full-blown expression of that? And it would be nice to have perhaps a simpler version. But again, some of those words are just so rich. And as a deacon who has frequently chanted the Exultet over the years, some of them are so powerful I get choked up as I do it, just simply because the power is so overwhelming.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you, Bill. It's great to have you with us. Blessings on your ministry and blessing on all deacons and all ministers in the church.
Thanks for having me. A real honor.